Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to a live streaming today. And in a few minutes, I think more people will be joining us for the live stream. I've got a very interesting topic tonight that I wanted to talk about, and it's dysfunctional families and the family super self. And what does that mean? And what do I mean when I talk about the family super self? It's a very important concept and it's a very important notion to explore because I think it's at the heart of a lot of what I teach and a lot of what I've learned. And that this super self causes, especially in dysfunctional families, causes lots of problems for people in their adulthood, certainly in their childhood as well, but I assume most of who I'm talking about are adults. And this family super self can be very stubborn and it can be very difficult to walk away from, to shake, to move out of, to, as we even say, self differentiate from. But it's a critical work if we can identify the super self and if we can begin to be ourselves rather than this internal family super self. So I hope tonight that you will subscribe, comment, make comments. I hope you'll like. And if you would like to donate, that would be great. That would help us with these free videos we offer everyone. And tonight is about that family super self and dysfunctional families. Another term I might use sometimes is the family brain. I might use the family brain. I might use the family super self. Murray Bowen, when he first started developing family systems theory, Bowen family systems theory, he began by using the term undifferentiated ego mass. Kind of a complicated term, not an easy one to understand so well, but it is accurate. It's that undifferentiated ego mass or emotional mass. Then it turned into what we would call family process, which is that family process, which is basically that undifferentiated ego mass that all families have. And in fact, that ego mass and in fact the family super self is older than just one generation, probably 5 generations. And so also when I talk about the family brain, I talk about maybe being the family of origin brain, the family of origin super self. So what do I mean by this super self? Well, this super self is kind of an umbrella identity for everyone in the family because the family is a system and this system is very interconnected emotionally, psychically or psychologically, DNA wise, and in all sorts of ways actions, rules, beliefs, reactions, all of that goes into the soup of this family super self. And this super self is what the family does. What does it do? How does it feel? How does it react? And I think that when I talk about that super self, many people might have a little difficulty starting out thinking about it that way because what we are typically told is that we are primarily individuals who happen to be connected with family members by birth, but yet we are autonomous and individuals, maybe we're not mature because maybe we have to grow up and go through the stages of development, but basically we're all separate from each other. And the concept that I'm sharing with you is maybe we're not all separate from each other. Maybe we are very, very interconnected and are interconnected all of our lives. However, we can take steps, learn tools, skills, mature, differentiate in a way where the family super self guides us less and causes us to respond in certain ways less, so that we can be ourselves while also being connected with that super self, but not in a way that defeats our differentiation and becoming ourselves. Bowen talked about it. No one ever gets to, on the self differentiation scale of 100. I think he was talking about maybe you could get to 60%, 70%, but certainly not 100% in a lifetime. And I would tend to agree with him. There are a lot of problems that take more than one lifetime to fix. And detachment from the family super self can maybe take more than one lifetime. But it doesn't mean we can't make significant progress in that area for those who wish to travel that road. And the family super self is a very important concept to begin to learn, because so many other concepts about self-differentiation flows from that notion. Another way of talking about the family super self, or what I might call super self life, is the unconscious, unreflected acceptance of the family process. And again, it is often a very unconscious process. And so we don't see it, we don't realize it. And in fact, so many people think, oh, well, I'm an individual from my family. They're them and I'm me. Yeah, but how much of that me has to do with them? And I think and I will ask people that because that's very important to ask about that, because we kind of tend to fool ourselves in thinking, well, I'm just, I'm just really separate from my family. What are you talking about? Or people have come into counseling or coaching or therapy over the years that I've worked with people, and they said, well, what has my family of origin got to do with me today? And I said, typically, I might even say, you making that statement is probably a reflection of the family of origin in you now. Just making that statement. The other statement that I hear so much is, I don't need to work on the past. I don't need to work on my past childhood issues because that's all in the past. I'm an adult now. I can make my own choices. Why do I have to deal with all that stuff? I just want to be mature and healthy and all that now. I think that statement even comes out of a family of origin super self way of thinking. So it's not something we can really get away from. We can deny it. We can not accept it. I let anybody deny it who wants to deny it. They're free to do that. And if someone thinks I'm all wrong, they can certainly have that opinion. That's fine with me. But I would just say good luck in trying to make the progress, development, recovery, and healing that you'd like to make. Because I think you're going to leave out a very big part of your existence and how you function. That you think it's you functioning when really it's the family super self functioning in you. So what do I mean by the family super self? It's how our self-identity, our emotional functioning is engulfed by this family instinctual life. And that's really true of all organisms and all animals and all biological things in the universe. And anything that has emotions This is true. Our self identity, our emotional functioning is engulfed by this family instinctual life. For example, I'll give you a very basic example. A lot of people would be familiar with this. Um, how many people have, uh, let's say, gone to, and I'll make it a very elementary, simple, primary example, have gone to somebody else's house, and it was the first time you went to somebody's house where they asked you to take your shoes off. But in your house, nobody ever took their shoes off inside the house. And then you go there and go, well, that seems very odd. Why would you do that? I mean, it's okay if they want to do that, but that just seems very anti instinctual to me. Why is it anti instinctual? Because that's what's instinctual to you from what was normal for you. If they came to your house and you said, oh, no, 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 keep your shoes on, they might feel the same way, as feeling very awkward or out of place. That this doesn't seem quite right. Now, it doesn't cause any problems. Most of the times, nobody gets into arguments about it. I tried to use a very simple example of that in terms of what we've come to see as normal. And what you've come to see as normal through your growing up is involved in this family super self. And our own self will be molded around that. Or at least a pseudo self, I could say that too, because a pseudo self is a self that's strongly connected to the family super self. That's what a pseudo self is. A real self is aware and acknowledges the family super self and then can act independently, non reactively, and based on your own values, beliefs, feelings, and desires and goals. That's a more solid self. A pseudo self is reactive, it is compliant, and so if someone goes to someone else's house, let's say, and we'll use that same example. They say, oh, well, we'll ask you to take off your shoes. Well, I'm not taking off my shoes. I don't have to take off my shoes inside a house. Why do I have to do that? Do you see them being reactive? What are they reactive about? The shoes? Taking them off? Or what they've always known to be instinctual from their family of origin, and now they are challenging, reactive to the people who are asking them to do that. It's not really about the shoes. It doesn't really matter whether you wear shoes inside or not. That's not a big issue, but people can get upset over that, like you're offending me. No, no one's offending you. You are so tied to your family super self that you get reactive over it. And there can be thousands of things like that that's a part of this super self. So it's our self identity, emotional functioning, and engulfed by the family instinctual life. And we call that the primary emotional system. That's an emotional system that we're a part of growing up. Who gets mad? When they get mad? Who gets upset? Who shows love? Who doesn't show love? Over what things and in what ways? All of that is a part of this primary emotional system in the family of origin. And families do that differently. And dysfunctional families do that dysfunctionally or immaturely. Another way of saying the family super self is the undifferentiated emotional oneness of the nuclear family. That undifferentiated emotional oneness of the nuclear family. Another way I've used the term for shorthand, I will use it as saying it's the family glue. It's the family glue that holds all of us together. Dad gets rageful, dad gets mad over who knows, everything, anything, certain things. And we all know that in the family. And so we're all ready for bear. We're already hyped up and tense, and our instinctual nature is kicking in with anxiety because we know that's going to happen. That's a part of the family glue and the family super self that we're a part of. And guess what happens if someone outside the family acts in those similar ways? We can be triggered right back into that family super self and those similar reactions. And again, I think it's that nuclear family emotional system. Sometimes I'll say family glue, sometimes I'll say emotional field. That's another thing when I think about emotional field. That means, for example, if I was sitting down with a couple working with them, the emotional field includes my emotional field, my family of origin's emotional field, their emotional field, and all of their family of origins emotional field. That's the emotional field that's in this room if we're all sitting in there together. And if you recognize that, then you will have much more opportunity to be more mature, make better choices, be less reactive, and many other benefits. Enmeshment to the family super self is involuntary emotional fusion. In other words, an infant is, if we can say, as their emotions are developing, but an infant is emotionally enmeshed with their parents, their mother. We know that. Is that voluntary? No, it would probably be involuntary. It's just the normal, organic, human connection that occurs when infancy comes. The same is true in other animal studies as well. And having that involuntary emotional fusion, we have that when we're growing up in a dysfunctional family. We have that in growing up in all families. We will be involuntarily connected to this emotional field. And a part of our maturity and recovery is to find our way out of that or find its way out of me. Then what's left is for me to be me. And I don't have all of that compelling, propelling, pushing me and creating reactivities in me because of my connectedness with this super self, which maybe you can start to understand or see the implication could actually bring about a lot more calmness, a lot more maturity, a lot more acceptance, and a lot less reactivity, which then I'd be able to guide my life in a different way. Now, why is it so important to even kind of understand this concept? Because I've found if we don't deal with this emotional glue, if we don't deal with this family super self, or I've said if we don't deal with the family of origin within us, because we're not just a group of separate interacting individuals, we're a part of an emotional system, and there's a difference. So if we deal with that emotional glue, we can make a lot of progress in dealing with problems, having fewer problems, because I think the more we are connected to this family glue and this family super self, especially in dysfunctional families, the more we are connected with that, the more vulnerable we are to emotional problems, relationship problems. I even think biological problems, medical problems, physical problems, emotional, mental problems. It really does hurt our immunity to when toxic things happen in our life. So I think it's important if we can understand that and begin to see ourselves operating in that way. Um, if, as we grow up, we learn to be adaptive and reactive to our family of origin. I'm sure you can think of ways that you've learned to do that. Like if you're always at high alert because dad's going to be rageful or upset, then guess what's going to happen as you get older? You're going to be more on high alert or anxiety in situations in which you think that might happen. And so we're still being adaptive and reactive to our family of origin, even when they're not even present and they're not even around. The interesting thing about this and what Bowen discovered was they don't have to be around. They are around, they're inside you. They don't have to be next to you. And that's why you can even do family of origin work, even if family of origin members have passed away. That process still continues. So it's not just because they're alive, it's what's been formed, programmed, and that instinctual life we've learned inside of us. And if we're adaptive and reactive to our family of origin, and many are, many who come and talk to me, when they go home to their family of origin, they find themselves being adaptive and reactive, and that we will then be adaptive and reactive to our other relationships in our lives. And if we have more stress, more anxiety from this family glue and this family super self, then we're going to be more vulnerable to reactivity, uncomfortable feelings, upsetness, hurts, taking things personally, finding relationships that are not very healthy. There are lots of things that can happen when that is still active within us. I know I've got a workshop coming up. I don't know when you're watching this video, but a workshop coming up here in a month or so. You can find it on my website, where it's, getting the family of origin out of you. Working on how do we get that family of origin out of me. Now you might say, well, how would I know if that family of origin is at work in me? Well, this is one of the things I have tend to notice. When I'm working with someone, or if I see someone or know someone, and they're being reactive, but let's say if I'm working with them, because otherwise I probably wouldn't ask someone this, because I'm not their therapist, I'm not their coach, so I wouldn't ask them. But if I was working with them, when someone is reactive, I ask, who from your past are you being reactive to? And many times, if given a moment or two, they can come up with someone that is a very similar repetition of this pattern, only it goes way back. And they go, well, that's funny. I mean, that's how I would have reacted to my mother. That's how I would have reacted to my sister. That's how I would have reacted to. And so when someone is reactive, I ask, who from your past are you reactive to? Because if we're reactive to somebody today, it's probably reactivity from yesterday or from the past. Otherwise, you might not have to be reactive at all. And do you know people who are not reactive to other people? There are a lot of people, if you push me, I probably wouldn't push you back. There are other people, if you push them, they definitely will push you back. I'm not saying I would be abused and do nothing about it. I'm not saying that. But I'm not saying I wouldn't have done that years ago. That's a different, I think. But I hope I've kind of grown to the place where if somebody pushes me, I don't have to push them back. Because people who even get into violence or things like that, I always like to find out, I would ask them, who are you pushing back? Well, they were treating me stupid at the gas station and blah, 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 blah. And I go, okay, cool. Now, who are you pushing back? It wasn't the gas station attendant. It was someone from long ago. Oh, well, that would be my brother who always bullied me and beat me up. Ah, it's just the gas station attendant got in the way of that old family super self that you're still connected to emotionally. I want to thank you, Gina, for your donation. I appreciate that very much. That helps us do our work here. So those are some questions I ask. And also when we're talking about, well, how do I identify this super self even more? I'll share some of the things you might want to observe. If anyone has a question they would like to ask, write capital question in all capitals, and then write a brief question if you'd like me to help you with that question. And you can send that in the chat. So, how would I begin to find out how my super self works in my life? And that's one of the things I do in working with people is help them observe and see how are they still living out that family glue, that family emotional field that's still at work, or the family of origin within you. First of all, you might want to start observing rather than absorbing. If you are absorbing, maybe some of you have heard Ross Rosenberg use that phrase, observe, don't absorb. If we are absorbing, we do that because of the emotional field and family super self we've grown up with. And many people have a hard time observing because all they've ever known is absorbing. That's all they've ever done or ever known. And that's what was normal for their family. That was them keeping their shoes on. And then when I come along and say, hey, how about you take your shoes off? What? What do you mean take my shoes off? That's ridiculous. You shouldn't have to take your shoes off. And, and so it challenges what they know to be true. But observing and not absorbing is a beginning way. Go to a family dinner. Go to some holiday when you're with your family. You can even do it with friends and with your own family, your own nuclear family, your kids, your husband, wife, partner. And begin to observe rather than absorb. See how others affect you emotionally. How are they affecting you emotionally? When do you start feeling emotional? When do you start feeling anxiety? When do you start feeling, or see how you feel reactive when you get reactive? Reactivity is often a sign of the super self and the family glue at work. So when you feel reactive, you might remember, oh, this may be a part of what's going on within me. Now, does that mean people don't do hurtful things or mean things or bad things or treat you wrong? No, of course it doesn't. People do that. People do that all the time. But that doesn't require me to be reactive. It may require me to be mature, and it may require me to call them to accountability, but that's not the same as reactivity and emotional reactivity. Because if I'm reactive, I actually lose self, not gain it. I lose it. It's a super self. It's a pseudo self reaction. See what you do when you see how others affect you emotionally, and when you see how you are reactive to other people. Begin to watch that and begin to see it and see it happen. And ask the questions, in what way do they affect you emotionally? Why are they affecting you emotionally? If somebody says, well, I probably would have cooked these potatoes longer, and you've made the potatoes for the family meal or whatever, and then you feel shamed, rejected, put down, criticized. Then you feel reactive, and you might say, well, you could have made him yourself then. All of that is a reenactment of the family super self. Because you could just as easily go, well, maybe I could have, but this is what I brought. And so what? Maybe you would have cooked them longer. That's fine. And the next time, if you would like to bring the potatoes, you can cook them longer and bring them. I'll be happy about that. You see how I'm not reactive. I'm not being polarized. I'm not being pushed to the other side. And I think that's important, because as the family super self begins to recede within us, we are less likely to be polarized. And when somebody says, well, I would have probably cooked the potatoes longer, you might go, oh, well, that's nice to know. I wonder what we're going to have for dessert today. It just doesn't matter. Rather than it grabs me emotionally, it grabs my identity, everything is now put on the line because of what they said. Even though they might have been trying to be mean, they could be mean. Well, you can be mean all you want, but it doesn't mean I have to be emotionally reactive to you. I don't want you to have that much power over me. If you're going to say, Jerry, you're stupid, ugly, you're going bald, you're four-eyed, and you're too fat. Okay. And what's your point? What does that matter? Now I could fall into pieces. I could connect with old shame. I could connect with old guilt. I can connect with all kinds of things with my family of origin. If I begin to get that family of origin out of me, then I'm going to be less vulnerable to other people's insensitivities. Let's see here. And so in what way do they affect you emotionally? What do you think and what do you feel? What would happen if you didn't think and feel this way? Okay, my aunt just came and told me, and she said I was dumb for not, for buying that car, and she couldn't understand why I would do that. I don't know, she's not buying the car, I'm buying the car. And I'm supposed to feel shamed, which you would feel shamed in your family of origin, because that's what the family may do as a part of their super self. That what I want to do is, instead of reactive, I can still feel I can still feel reactive. I just don't want to be reactive. And then I want to identify, what am I thinking and what am I feeling? Because they've said something that's now made me feel and think something. I don't want other people to make me feel and think something. I want to decide what I'm going to feel and think, not what you want me to feel and think. And I think that's where a more self-differentiated person is that's an area that a person can achieve in doing this work. Have I done it perfectly? Oh, heavens no. I probably got decades to go before I can even be quite a bit better. Probably a long time. So what would happen if you didn't think and feel this way, and then ask the question, when did you first learn to think and feel this way? When did you first learn to think and feel this way? Because usually you can identify when that happened, because it's a part of the family super self. So if you have questions that you'd like to ask me, Sadie, you're very nice. Well, you might be correct, Sadie. Jerry, being my dysfunctional super self, brings me energy and joy. All else feels dull. how to change. No, you're right. I think there's a lot of. At first, I thought you were talking about I was your dysfunctional super self, which would have been okay too. The Yeah, well, I'm not saying you have to change if you don't want to. If it brings you energy and joy, and everything feels dull, then probably you're not going to change until you're ready to change. First of all, we have to see how it doesn't work for us. If all we see is how it works for us, it is difficult to make someone change. So you may want to identify, how does this work for you? How does it not work for you? Um, and take a look at that. Then maybe you can evaluate. Well, maybe it doesn't work quite so well. But if it's all working, and if somebody comes to me and it's all working for them, I'm going, hey, you don't need me. Continue doing what you're doing. If you ever find that it doesn't work for you, then you might want to, check into how you might be able to make some changes. And and that's true with about anything. Somebody who says they have this horrible partner, a horrible spouse, and says, "Oh, they're just terrible." Well, have you thought about leaving? Is that something you've ever considered? Oh, no, 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 I'd never leave. Well, then you've made your decision. Then obviously it's not to a place where you think you would need to make that kind of decision. All of us do that, and we're only ready to change when we have to change and when it kind of hurts to not change. Um, and also, I'd want to find out what does that dullness mean? What does for you, Sadie? That's something you might want to journal about. When I don't um, use the dysfunctional super self and live out of that, everything else feels dull. And there are people, and I think even family super selves can be addicted to drama, addicted to crises, addicted to problems, and so to do anything other than that just doesn't feel right. And I know that's true for adult children of alcoholics, adult children of narcissists. I mean, certainly, and even recovering alcoholics, for example. I've worked with many over the years, and in treatment centers and such, and just it's so difficult when their life is so full of uh, high anxiety and sometimes high stress, and just very uh, what I had the word and then I lost the word, but it has a lot of excitement, and then they get addicted to that excitement. Then you take away the alcohol, and now like everything's like, duh, this is it. Life is just all boring. I don't have all of that going on in my life, and that's one of the things alcoholics and addicts have to work on. Is what do I do with this life that's so different than all the kinetic life of being an active alcoholic or addict? Thanks, Sadie. Stonewall has a question. Does the family scapegoat have more of a difficult time coping with the family super self? Well, I would say yes. Do you know that what we've found is what I think is true? Scapegoats are more likely to exit the family super self than other members of the family. And in fact, that's often why they are the scapegoat, because they are wanting to not accept and comply with the family super self. And so then they become the target and have a target on them. And certainly scapegoats probably already have a difficult time coping with the family super self because they see too much, or they see outside the family dysfunction, or they see how, well, this is just crazy, or they see how, things are, this is just mean. And I think that scapegoats can be have a very good chance of moving beyond the emotional field of the family if they choose to work on that. But we have to do some work on, letting go of that family. And I don't necessarily mean going no contact, though sometimes that does happen, but letting go of it emotionally. And if we can do that, actually, we can end up in a more healthy situation than maybe some of the other family members. Thanks, Stonewall. Well, that's an interesting question. How can you get the bullies out of you? Well, there can be bullies inside of you. And I think that if we have learned to give them a voice, and we can then learn to give them not a voice. And I think we can do things to work on that bullying side of us, in which it's a part of us that we want to understand, learn, and not give our power away over to them if we have bullies inside of us. We could probably talk all night on that subject, but that's an interesting question. I'll think about that some more. What do you mean when you react or are reactive, you lose self? Do you mean that you emotionally react? Yes. When we are emotionally reactive, we are not operating out of a self-differentiated self. We are operating out of a pseudo-self. We end up being a pseudo-self, and let me tell you why I mean that. Because you're making me do something. You're making me react. And so now I'm reactive. Is that me, or is that the process of the relationship that's making me do that? If it's the process of the relationship, meaning this emotional field, that's not fully me. That's me reacting to what's going on in the relationship. And that's not a true self. So that's why when we say when you're being emotionally reactive, you're not being your true self. Now, please don't write me and say, well, what if somebody's threatening to harm your daughter and I understand there are circumstances in which it would be very difficult to stay calm. It would be, I understand all of that. And there are fight and flight things that go on in us as biological creatures. And I do know that. But I'm talking about the situations in which we are just reactive with someone. Just like being reactive to the gas station attendant. That's not you being you. That's you being your reactive you that you learned long ago and are still being. And I'm not sure it's truly you. It's truly the family super self, but I don't think it's truly you. Because I think if you were self-differentiated, you might handle that differently. So I hope that helps, Hales. And in fact, there are some good books, and I might even recommend, while I'm doing it right now, one is called Extraordinary Relationships, A New Way of Thinking About Human Interactions by Roberta Gilbert. And she does understand Bowen family theory. She's got some very good things in there that will help you with that reactivity and thinking about that reactivity. Since we're talking about the family super self, I might also recommend If You Met My Family, You'd Understand, a family systems primer by Jack Shimada. And I believe that would be another good book to read. And then if you're even more eager to read more deeply, Bowen Theory Secrets Revealing the Hidden Life of Families by Michael Kerr. And there's a lot of good things in there, and he's going to talk about the family super self and self differentiation, and I think he'd be able to help you if you wanted more to read and to learn about this. Let's see. E-Rock asked, what are some good in the moment ways of not absorbing, not reacting when there's an 80-20 shot of having to walk past them in the building, and also family ties? Okay, when you're going to see somebody, and how do I, then what I would, well, I'm not sure if they're going to be speaking to you or not speaking to you. I immediately think of someone, and well, here's another example. You see someone from your past in high school or something you had some difficulty with. Now you're 40, 50 years old or whatever. They're walking on one side of the street, you're walking there too, and then you decide to go to the other side of the street because you just don't want to meet up with them. Isn't that a reactivity? What is it? What is it? What does it really uh, matter if you go by them? And if somebody says hi, I go hi and go on. I'm not going to rehash the past. I don't need to not be cordial. Nor do I need to go to the other side of the street. I live on this planet too, and I can walk wherever I want to walk. In this situation, in the moment ways of not absorbing and not reacting, if you're going to see someone, if I think that's going to happen, then I do some predicting and some planning. What do I predict they might say or do? And then I would work on what would I then respond in what they would say or do, and I would keep focused on that, and I would do that before that would happen so that I would know what to say. If they have toxic family ties, long as they treat me with respect, and if they don't treat me with respect, let's say I assume, oh, they're not going to treat me with respect, then I will just walk by them and ignore whatever they say. I don't care what they have to say. It's all, as I've said in other videos, it's all Coca-Cola to me. You're just calling me Coca-Cola, which doesn't make any sense. But if you think that makes sense, then call me a Coca-Cola. You can do that all you want. So I don't want to absorb what they have to say. And that's one of the things I think about having in front of me a screen or a filter in which nothing goes in that I don't decide goes in. So even if it's a compliment, I decide whether it goes in or not. If it's a toxic statement, I decide whether it goes in or not. I want that filter there where I decide. I'm not just going to absorb it. And people say crazy things. And if they're in toxic families or toxic family super selves, they do say crazy things. Why do you care? So what? People say crazy things all the time. I don't want it to determine my emotional reactivity. And well, Jerry, I think you're a SOB. And I would say, and you have a nice day too. And again, because I don't care what the words they said. I will act like an adult. I'm going to be connected to myself. You can be reactive to the super self you're talking out of and telling me about how I'm an SOB, because probably it's not you that even came up with that. You're just functioning out of a super self that you're dealing with. And so we want to take it far less serious. And so I do try to evaluate not all statements, words, feelings, and thoughts that come from other people are equal. They are not equal. And I decide how important they are and how unimportant they are. And I think that's a more differentiated way to look at it. Hope that helps a little. Um, let's see here. How does a healthy family system look like and feel like? Thanks a lot. Merry Christmas, Adriana. How does a healthy family system look like and feels like? Well, and I think there's in these books you'll also read kind of what a healthy family uh, would be like. And a healthy family is one in which there is all the things we think of about maturity. There's respect, there's appropriate distance and appropriate closeness. The intimacy has separateness, and the separateness has connectedness in a healthy family. A healthy family isn't shaming out of the past, abusive from the past. It is one in which a family has compassion for one another, empathy for one another. Parents are not overly fused with their kids because, again, the parents who are overly fused with their kids have unresolved attachments with their parents. And we find that those kind of triangles happening. And if if mom or dad, let's say, is very overconnected to grandma, then guess what's going to happen to the grandkids? That's going to spill over into there, and that super self is going to continue to work throughout the generations. The good thing about doing this work or workshops that I have, or learning about these, listening to my videos, is so that we don't pass on those things to future generations. And they have more of a chance to be healthy and happy and not carry and inherit our unresolved problems, dysfunction, and toxicity. Because I think of this: whatever issues you don't resolve, you will leave for your children to resolve. We all do. We all leave issues for our children to resolve, but how many do you want to leave them to resolve? I think it's best to resolve as many as we can. And the more grown up and mature we can be and self differentiated, the less residue over to that intergenerational transmission of this emotional field will be less, at least in a toxic way. There are lots of other categories for healthy, but those are just a few. And Emil asks, how would you recommend handling toxic relatives who will instantly ask you how you are doing whenever they meet you in public? Oh, toxic relatives. Okay, well, it depends on how toxic they are. If they're really toxic, I might say, well, and Uncle Fred, why do you ask? I can always ask, why do you ask? Or I can say, I'm doing well. Why do you ask? I can always ask that if they're that toxic. Because I never have to answer any question I don't want to. And I always have a right to ask someone, what is the meaning or the purpose of the question? Because, it can be very confusing. Well, I'm asking it. You should just answer it. I don't have to answer any questions. People will all the time say, well, how are you doing with that? I really don't wish to discuss that. And somebody can say, well, how are you doing? I really don't wish to discuss it. And you can say, well, they might just feel hurt or feel like you're rebuffing them. Well, if they're toxic family members, I think there's a bigger picture here. I'm not just trying to rebuff them. It's that, no, I don't want to have that discussion with them. I may not want to give them any more information about me. I may not really want to give them any more information. There may be a reason why I don't want to discuss that. Because anything I tell them, it's going to go get churned through the toxic part of the family. Well, I don't want it to be. I can't stop all of it from happening, but I'm not giving nosy or unloving family members who are unsafe information to use in a bad way. I don't have to. I don't want to. Yeah, and Hales has another good question. Is the overly fused family similar to codependency, which usually refers to other types of relationships? No, it is similar, but codependency has a sort of family systems notion. Actually, codependency and many of the family roles that I used to teach for family members of addicts and alcoholics, because I was the family counselor in the inpatient treatment. That all came from family systems in family marriage and family therapy and theory. That all came over into addictions from there, and so it is like that. And I used to do codependency groups, and we can call things codependency, but I think it still lacks a stronger systemic or systems view of how interconnected people are. the Because it's like somebody will say, well, I'm codependent on them, but I'm not codependent on them. Okay, well, that's not really a very systems notion. Maybe you're fused with your family of origin superself or codependent on the family of origin superself to where this person you'd be fused with and this person you would not. And so that's where I think this idea has a little more universal application. Trying to think. I think we're just about at the time where we're going to have to call it an evening. I appreciate your questions, and I appreciate you asking questions about the topic too. That was very helpful. I hope you will subscribe. I hope you'll join the channel. I hope you'll comment on this video, and I hope you'll like it too. And you may want to send it to someone else or share it to someone else. That helps us as well, because we'd like to get these videos out to other people, and we have some new things coming up. I hope you'll take a look at my website, and I think you'll find some things on there that might be of interest to you, especially coming up soon. Well, it's about time for me to say goodnight. I want to thank you very much for watching and listening to me all this time. Thank you for your questions. I hope you have a great day, and be wise.